In this video, we'll explore over 145 of the most common phrases used in everyday American English. These phrases are used constantly in daily life. Whether you're chatting with friends, shopping at a store, ordering food, working at a job, or just talking with someone on the phone. If you want to sound more natural, more fluent, and more confident when speaking English, then this video is exactly what you need. We'll go through a variety of real-life phrases used by native speakers. I'll explain what each one means, and how to use it. And of course, I'll include lots of practice examples and situations so you can understand how to use them in context. Let's begin with some simple phrases that are incredibly common in everyday conversations. You've probably heard people say things like, "What's up?" or "How's it going?" These are informal greetings used among friends or people you know well. "What's up?" doesn't always mean that the person wants to know what you're doing. It's more of a casual hello. The usual reply might be, "Not much," or "Just hanging out." So you might hear a conversation like this, "Hey, what's up?" And the other person responds, "Not much, just relaxing. You?" Another friendly phrase is, "How's it going?" And you might answer with, "Pretty good," or "Can't complain." Another very common phrase is, "I'm good," which is often used in response to, "How are you?" In American English, saying, "I'm good" is a perfectly natural way to say you're doing well. For example, someone might say, "Hey Mia, how are you today?" And I'd answer, "I'm good, thanks. How about you?" Notice how casual and friendly that sounds. It's all about tone and connection. You'll also hear people say, "No worries," or "It's all good." These phrases are used to show that everything is okay, even if something didn't go as planned. For instance, if someone accidentally bumps into you and says, "Oh, I'm sorry," you might respond with, "No worries." Or if a friend is late and apologizes, you could say, "It's all good. I just got here too." These phrases help to keep communication friendly and stress-free. Another important phrase is, "Sounds good." This is often used to show agreement or approval. If someone says, "Let's meet at 5," you can reply with, "Sounds good." It's a quick way to say you agree with the plan. Similarly, you might hear, "That works for me," which also means that the plan or suggestion is okay with you. For example, "Can we do the meeting tomorrow morning?" And you say, "Sure, that works for me." Now, let's talk about phrases used when making or changing plans. In daily life, people often say things like, "Let me know," which means you're asking someone to inform you later. For example, "Let me know if you need help," or "Let me know what time works best for you." It's a polite way to keep communication open. Another phrase that's useful is, "I'm down," which is informal and means "I'm interested" or "I agree." For example, if your friend says, "Do you want to go see a movie tonight?" and you reply, "Yeah, I'm down," that means you're happy to go. In the same way, you can say "I'm in" to show you're joining something. Like, "We're planning a road trip this weekend. Are you in?" And you could say, "Definitely, I'm in." Let's pause and try a quick practice session with the phrases we've learned so far. Imagine you're texting a friend. They ask, "Hey, what's up?" You respond with, "Not much, just chilling." You? Then they say, "Want to grab lunch at 1?" And you reply, "Sounds good, I'm down." Finally, they add, "Cool, let me know if you want me to pick you up." This kind of exchange is super common in American English, and using these phrases will help you sound more fluent and relaxed. Let's keep going. In American English, you'll also hear people say, "I'm just kidding," or simply, "just kidding," when they want to show that something they said was a joke. This is useful when you say something funny or sarcastic and want to make sure the other person knows you're not serious. For example, if you say, "You're always late, just kidding," it means you're joking and don't really mean it. Another way to say it is, "I'm just messing with you," which is also playful and not meant to offend. If you're surprised or impressed, you might say, "No way," or "Are you serious?" These are common expressions of surprise or disbelief. For example, if someone says, "I won the lottery," you might respond with, "No way, that's amazing." You can also use, "You've got to be kidding me," for situations that seem unbelievable. For instance, if you find out your flight was canceled at the last minute, you might say, "You've got to be kidding me." Now let's look at some phrases used in daily tasks. When you go shopping, you might say, "I'm just looking." If a store clerk asks if you need help, this lets them know you're browsing, but not ready to buy yet. You might also hear, "Do you have this in a different size?" Or, "Can I try this on?" When shopping for clothes. When ordering food, you could say, "I'll have the cheeseburger," or "Can I get a coffee to go?" These are natural, simple phrases for common situations. You'll also hear, "I'm on it," which means you're taking care of something or starting it right away. For example, if your boss says, "Can you send me that report?" you might reply, "I'm on it." Another phrase is, "I got it," which can mean "I understand," or "I'll take care of it." Like if someone says, "Can you grab the phone?" and you say, "I got it." It means you'll do it. It can also mean you understood something clearly, like when someone explains something to you, and you respond, "Got it." Another useful phrase is, "That makes sense." This is used when something becomes clear or understandable. If someone explains why a store is closed early, you could respond, "Oh, that makes sense." It shows that now you understand the reason. If you're not sure about something, you might say, "I'm not sure," or "Let me think about it." These are polite ways to express uncertainty or delay a decision. Now let's do another practice example. Imagine you're at work. Your coworker says, "The client meeting moved to 2 p.m. You answer, "Got it, that makes sense." Then your boss says, "Can you update the presentation?" And you respond, "I'm on it." Later, someone asks if you want to join a group lunch. You reply, "Let me think about it. I might be busy." This shows how these phrases can be used naturally in a work setting. We'll continue building your vocabulary and fluency with even more useful and high-frequency American English phrases. Remember, the goal is not just to memorize, but to understand when and how to use each phrase naturally. Let's keep moving with more everyday phrases that American English speakers use naturally in conversation. One extremely common phrase you'll hear is, "hang on" or "hold on." These both mean to wait a moment. If someone is on the phone and needs a second to do something, they might say, "Hang on, let me grab a pen." Or, "Hold on, I'm checking the calendar." These expressions are casual and polite ways to ask for a moment before continuing. Another great one is, "Be right back," often shortened to BRB in text messages. It means you're stepping away, but will return soon. If you're chatting with someone and need to get a drink, you might say, "BRB, I need some water." It's useful in both spoken and written communication. You might also say, "Give me a sec," which means give me a second. It's just another way to say, "Wait a moment." Now let's talk about "it depends." This is a very common phrase used when the answer to a question isn't simple. For example, if someone asks, "Do you like living in the city?" you might say, "It depends on the neighborhood, the weather, and the people." It means the answer changes based on the situation. In daily conversations, people often use it when things aren't black and white. Let's not forget "I mean," which is often used to clarify or add more to what was just said. For example, "I don't love the movie. I mean, it was okay, but not great." It helps explain your thoughts more fully. Another similar phrase is "you know," which can be used to check if the listener understands or agrees. For example, "I didn't really like the ending." You know? It's like checking in during a conversation. You'll also hear phrases like, "by the way," and "anyway." "By the way" is used when you want to mention something not directly related to the main topic. For example, "By the way, I saw your friend yesterday." It adds extra information. "Anyway" is used to return to the main topic or to change the subject. For example, "Anyway, let's get back to the meeting agenda." Now here's another phrase, "not really." This is used to gently say no or disagree. If someone asks, "Do you like spicy food?" and you don't, you might say, "not really." It's a softer, more polite way to express a negative opinion. You can also say, "I don't think so," which is also more gentle than a hard no. These expressions are very common in casual conversations. How about the phrase "kind of" or "sort of"? These are used to soften a statement or express uncertainty. For example, "Are you tired?" might be answered with "kind of," or "Was the movie good?" and you say "sort of." "It was okay." These are perfect for giving unclear or middle-of-the-road answers. They help you sound more natural and less direct. Now let's do a short practice example with these. Imagine you're on a call with a friend, and they say, "Do you have time to talk now?" And you say, "Hold on, I just need to close the door." "Okay, I'm back." Then they ask, "Did you like that show we watched?" And you answer, "Sort of, I mean, it was interesting, but kind of slow." Then they say, "I thought the ending was boring." And you respond, "Yeah, I know, right? Anyway, what are you up to this weekend?" These conversations happen every day, and the more you hear and practice them, the easier they become. Let's look at another group of common phrases used when expressing feelings. You'll hear phrases like "I'm tired" or "I'm exhausted" to describe low energy. "I'm beat" is a more casual version of this. For example, "I worked all day, and now I'm beat." Another one is, "I'm stressed out," which is very common when someone is overwhelmed. For example, I've got 3 projects due tomorrow. I'm totally stressed out. On the more positive side, you might hear people say, I'm pumped, or I'm excited when looking forward to something. For instance, I'm pumped for the concert this weekend. Or you could say, I'm looking forward to it, which is a more polite and formal version. It's helpful to know both the casual and more formal versions of these expressions, because you'll hear them in different situations. We also use expressions like, that's awesome, or that's amazing, to react positively to news. If someone says they got a new job, you might reply, that's awesome, congratulations. You might also say, good for you, or nice work to show support. These kinds of responses help keep the conversation friendly and encouraging. If someone tells you something unfortunate, like they didn't get the job, you might respond with, that sucks, which is informal and used when things go badly. You can also say, I'm sorry to hear that for a more polite or formal situation. For example, I'm sorry to hear about your loss, or I'm sorry to hear you're not feeling well. These responses are important for showing empathy. Let's do a little practice with emotions and reactions. Your friend says, I just found out I got the job. And you respond, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. Then another friend says, I missed my flight. And you reply, oh no, that sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. Later, your coworker says, I'm so tired. And you say, yeah, same here. I'm beat today too. These short phrases make your conversations feel real and natural. Another phrase you'll often hear is fingers crossed. This means you're hoping for good luck. If someone is about to go to a job interview, you might say, good luck, fingers crossed for you. Similarly, people say break a leg when wishing someone luck, especially before a performance. It sounds strange, but it's actually a positive thing to say. When people agree with each other, they often say exactly or totally. These are very common in American English. For example, this weather is perfect, and someone responds, totally. Or someone says, that movie was too long, and you agree, exactly. You can also use for sure to show strong agreement. For instance, do you want to go to the beach tomorrow? And you say, for sure. We also use you bet to mean definitely or of course. If someone says, can I borrow your charger? You could say, you bet. Another one is no doubt, which means you strongly agree. Like, she's the best player on the team, and you say, no doubt. Let's do one more mini practice. Someone says, this place has the best pizza, and you answer, totally, no doubt. Then they ask, will you come to the game? And you say, you bet, I wouldn't miss it. These phrases are short, but they add a lot of energy to your speech. Now let's talk about phrases used when making suggestions or giving advice. One of the most common ways to suggest something is by saying, how about, for example, how about we go out for dinner tonight? Or, how about taking a break? It's a friendly and casual way to offer an idea. A similar phrase is, why don't we, as in, why don't we watch a movie? Or, why don't we call her and ask? These are both soft and polite ways to suggest an action. Another useful one is, maybe we could. This one is especially helpful when you want to sound gentle or not too pushy. For example, Maybe we could try that new coffee place. These kinds of expressions are often used in group settings where you want to include everyone in the decision. You'll also hear people say things like, "Let's give it a try," which means you're open to experimenting or seeing how something goes. When giving advice, "You should" is a phrase that you'll hear a lot. For example, "You should drink more water," or "You should talk to your boss about it." This is straightforward, but can sound a bit strong. To make it softer, people often say, "If I were you, I'd..." For example, "If I were you, I'd take the job." Or, "If I were you, I'd rest for a bit." It's a good way to give advice without sounding too direct. Practice this short example. Imagine your friend says, "I'm not sure what to do about the meeting." You could reply, "Maybe we could go over your notes together." Then your friend says, "I'm so stressed about everything." You might say, "If I were you, I'd take a break and go for a walk." These little conversations are full of real-life expressions you'll hear every day. Let's now go into expressions used when asking for help or offering help. One of the simplest ways to ask for help is to say, "Can you help me?" Or, "Could you help me with this?" These are polite and clear. You can also ask, "Do you mind helping me?" Or, "Would you mind explaining this?" These forms are even more polite and common in professional or formal situations. When offering help, you might say, "Do you need a hand?" Or, "Can I help you with that?" These are friendly and kind expressions. Another great one is, "Let me know if you need anything." People say this to be supportive, especially when someone is going through a tough time. For example, "I heard you're moving this weekend. Let me know if you need anything." Here's a quick practice example. You're in the office, and a coworker is struggling with their presentation. You ask, "Do you need a hand?" And they reply, "Yes, could you help me check my slides?" Later, you see a friend moving boxes and you say, "Can I help you with that?" These everyday situations show how natural and useful these expressions are. Let's switch gears and look at expressions used to show interest in what someone is saying. A really simple one is, "Really?" with a rising tone. It shows surprise or interest. For example, "I won a contest." "Really?" You can also say, "No way," or "You're kidding." These are strong expressions of surprise or disbelief. For example, "I got front row tickets to the concert." "No way, that's amazing." Another great one is, "That's interesting." It's a more neutral way to show that you're listening and care about what the other person is saying. You might say it when someone tells you something new. "I've been learning how to cook Indian food." That's interesting. "What dishes have you tried?" It encourages the conversation to keep going. People also say, "Tell me more," or "Go on," to show that they want the speaker to continue. These are very encouraging and positive. You can also use "I see" or "Got it" to show that you're following along. These little words may seem small, but they are very important for being a good listener. Here's another practice moment. Your friend says, "I finally met my favorite author yesterday." And you say, "No way, that's awesome. Tell me more." Then they say, "She signed my book and even talked with me for 5 minutes." You reply, "Really? That's so cool. What did you talk about? These phrases help you connect with others and keep the conversation flowing. Let's now talk about expressions related to time. You'll often hear phrases like in a bit, in a minute, or in a sec. These all mean soon and are used casually. For example, I'll be there in a second. Or, let's leave in a bit. They are not exact, but are used often in informal conversation. You can also say right now to mean immediately, or later on to mean after some time. People often say, see you soon, see you in a few, or catch you later, as ways to say goodbye, but with the idea that they'll see you again soon. These are very friendly and common. For example, I have to go now, catch you later. Or, I'll call you in a bit, see you soon. Here's one more practice example. You say to a coworker, I'll email you the report in a bit, and they say, sounds good, talk later. Or your friend texts you, I'm heading out now, catch you later. These everyday phrases help make your English sound more natural and confident. Let's move on to expressions used when talking about your feelings or mood. These are phrases that help you describe how you're doing. And they're super important for daily conversations. A very common one is, I'm feeling under the weather. This means you don't feel well. Maybe you have a cold or feel tired. For example, I'm feeling a bit under the weather today, so I might leave early. Another common one is, I'm in a good mood, or I'm in a bad mood. These describe how you feel emotionally. You might say, I'm in such a good mood today. The sun is out and I slept well. Or, I didn't get enough sleep, so I'm in a bad mood. People also say, I'm stressed out when they have too much to do, or are feeling pressure. For example, I have 3 deadlines this week. I'm so stressed out. Or you might hear, I'm exhausted, which means extremely tired. I stayed up late working. I'm exhausted. These are very natural and commonly used in work or school settings. If you want to express happiness, you might say, I'm really excited. I'm so happy. Or I'm thrilled. For example, I'm thrilled about my new job. Or I'm excited to see my family this weekend. Here's a small practice moment. Your friend says, how are you feeling today? You reply, I'm feeling a bit under the weather, but I'll be okay. Or another day, they say, you seem really happy. And you respond, yeah, I'm in a great mood. I just got some good news. These conversations help express how you feel in a simple, natural way. Now let's look at expressions people use when making plans or talking about intentions. A common one is, I'm planning to, for example, I'm planning to visit my parents this weekend, or I'm planning to start working out more. You can also say, I'm thinking of, as in, I'm thinking of trying a new restaurant tonight. These are useful when you're not 100% sure yet, but have an idea in mind. Another one is, I've decided to. This is more definite. For example, I've decided to learn Spanish, or I've decided to take the job offer. It means you have made up your mind. Then we have I might or I may, which are used when you are unsure. For example, I might go out later, or I may take a vacation next month. These expressions are especially useful when you are talking about the future, in a casual or uncertain way. Here's another short practice. You and your friend are chatting, and you say, "I'm planning to start a new hobby." Your friend asks, "What kind of hobby?" And you say, "I'm thinking of learning how to paint." Then they say, "That sounds fun. I might join you." These everyday phrases help you sound fluent and relaxed. Let's move on to expressions for agreement and disagreement. If you agree with someone, a simple "I agree" works. But there are also other natural phrases like, "That's true," "Exactly," or "You're right." For example, "This weather is amazing." Exactly. I love sunny days. Or someone might say, "That meeting was really long." And you respond, "You're right. It felt like forever." If you disagree but want to be polite, you can say, "I'm not sure about that." Or, "I see what you mean, but..." These expressions help you sound respectful, even when you don't agree. For example, "I think we should cancel the trip." "I see what you mean, but maybe we can just shorten it instead." Or you can say, "I'm afraid I disagree," which is formal and polite. It's often used in work or professional settings. Practice time again. Imagine someone says, "I think we should skip the meeting." You reply, "I'm not sure about that. It might be important." Or they say, "This restaurant is terrible." And you say, "I see what you mean, but I actually like their pasta." These kinds of phrases help you express opinions clearly and kindly. Let's now talk about expressions related to technology and online communication. In today's world, we often hear things like, "Let me check my phone," or "I'll text you later." These are very common in casual conversation. For example, "Let me check my phone. I think she messaged me." Or, "I'll text you when I'm on the way." People also say things like, "I'm online now," or "I was just scrolling through Instagram." These reflect modern daily activities. Another popular one is, "I'm having trouble with my Wi-Fi," which you might say when your internet connection is bad. Or, "My phone is dying," which means the battery is low. People also say, "Let's do a video call," or "I'll send you a link." These are all useful for staying connected with others. Try this practice scenario. You're on a video call and the image freezes. You say, "I think my Wi-Fi is acting up." Or someone says, "I didn't get your email." And you reply, "Let me resend it." These expressions help you manage daily tech problems smoothly and naturally. Now let's talk about expressions used in shopping or buying things. A very common one is, "How much is this?" Or, "How much does it cost?" You use this when you want to know the price of something. For example, "How much is this shirt?" Or, "How much does this coffee cost?" These are very common in stores or cafes. Another useful phrase is, "I'm just looking." This is something people often say when they walk into a store, but don't need help yet. For example, a store employee might ask, "Can I help you with anything?" And you can say, "No thanks. I'm just looking." If you want to try something on, like clothes or shoes, you can say, "Can I try this on?" Or, "Where's the fitting room?" These are useful when shopping for clothes. You might also hear or say, "Do you have this in a different size?" Or, "Do you have this in blue?" These are great ways to ask for options. When you're ready to pay, people say, "I'll take this," or "I'd like to buy this." And if you're using a credit card, you might say, Can I pay with card? Or, do you take credit cards? Practice time. Imagine you walk into a shoe store. You ask, "Hi, how much are these sneakers?" The clerk says, "They're $80. You respond, "Thanks. Can I try them on in size 9? Later, you decide to buy them and say, "I'll take these. Can I pay by card?" These expressions are used every day and help make shopping easier and more comfortable. Let's now look at expressions used at restaurants or cafes. When you enter, you might hear, "Table for two?" or "Would you like a booth or a table?" These are common questions the host might ask. You can reply with, "A table for two, please," or "A booth is fine." When the server comes, they might say, "Can I take your order?" Or, "Are you ready to order?" You can respond with, "I'll have the chicken sandwich," or "Can I get a coffee, please?" If you need more time, just say, "Can we have a few more minutes?" Or, "I'm not ready yet." These are polite ways to ask for extra time. When the food comes, people often say, "Enjoy your meal." And it's polite to respond with, "Thanks." If you need something, you might say, "Could we get some water?" Or, "Can I have some extra napkins?" And when you're done, you can ask, "Can we get the check, please?" Or, "Could we have the bill?" Here's a little practice scene. You and a friend sit at a restaurant. The server asks, "Are you ready to order?" And you say, "Yes, I'll have the pasta, please." Later you ask, "Can we get the check?" And the server replies, "Of course, I'll be right back." These interactions are very natural and easy to practice. Now let's talk about expressions you'll hear and use when traveling or at the airport. A useful one is, "Where's the check-in counter?" Or, "Where can I check my bags?" These are helpful when you first arrive at the airport. Then you might hear, "Can I see your passport?" Or, "Do you have any carry-on luggage?" These are things the airline staff will ask you. You can respond with, "Yes, here it is." Or, "I just have this small bag." Another helpful phrase is, "What time does the flight board?" Or, "When do we need to be at the gate?" These help you know when to go. You'll also hear, "Flight XYZ is now boarding at gate 12." Or, "Your flight has been delayed." If you're asking someone for help, you can say, "Excuse me, can you help me find gate B5?" Or, "Where's the nearest restroom?" Here's a quick practice moment. You're at the airport and say, "Excuse me, where can I check in for American Airlines?" The staff replies, "Over there, near counter 10. Later, you ask, "What time does flight 204 leave?" And they say, "It boards at 3:15. These are all very real and useful airport interactions. Let's now talk about expressions used when giving directions or asking for them. If you're looking for a place, you might ask, "How do I get to the library?" Or, "Can you tell me the way to the post office?" These are polite and clear. People often reply with directions like, "Go straight and then turn left." Or, "It's 2 blocks down on your right." You might also hear, "It's across from the bank." Or, "It's next to the grocery store." If you're using public transportation, you might say, "Where's the nearest bus stop?" Or, "Does this train go downtown?" These are helpful when you're in a new city or unfamiliar area. Another useful one is it far from here? Or, can I walk there from here? These help you figure out distance and time. Practice time again. Imagine you're in a new city and ask someone, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to the museum?" They reply, "Sure, go straight for 2 blocks, then turn right. It's next to the coffee shop." Then you ask, "Is it far?" And they say, "Not at all. Just a 5-minute walk." These small conversations are full of real-life vocabulary. Now let's talk about expressions you use when talking about health and wellness. These are very useful for everyday conversations, especially when you're not feeling well or talking to a doctor. One of the most common ones is, "I don't feel well." You can also say, "I feel sick," or "I'm not feeling my best." These are all natural ways to describe feeling unwell. For example, "I don't feel well today. I think I'll stay home." Or, "I feel a bit off. Maybe I caught something." If you want to be more specific, you can say things like, "I have a headache," "My stomach hurts," or "I have a sore throat." These are very common and help others understand what's wrong. For example, "I can't concentrate. I have a bad headache." Or, "I didn't sleep well. My back is sore." You can also use phrases like, "I'm coming down with something," which means you think you're about to get sick. For example, "I'm coming down with a cold." When you go to the doctor, you might hear questions like, "What seems to be the problem?" Or, "Where does it hurt?" And you can answer, "I've been coughing a lot," or "My leg has been hurting since yesterday." These are helpful when explaining symptoms. You might also hear or use, "I need to make an appointment," or "I'm here for a checkup." Here's a practice example. Imagine you're at the doctor's office. The doctor asks, "How can I help you today?" You say, "I've been feeling tired, and my throat is sore." The doctor replies, "Let's take a look." These phrases are so helpful in real health-related situations. Let's move on to expressions used when talking about relationships or personal life. A very common one is, "We're just friends," which means there's no romantic relationship. Or you might hear, "We've been dating for a while," which means 2 people are in a relationship. People also say, "We broke up," which means they ended a romantic relationship. These expressions are often used in casual conversations with friends. If you're talking about your family, you might say, "I'm close to my sister," which means you have a good relationship. Or, "My brother and I don't get along," which means you argue or don't have a great relationship. These are common ways to describe family or social dynamics. You can also use phrases like, "I have a big family," or "My parents are divorced." These describe your family background. Here's a conversation example. A friend says, "Do you have any siblings?" And you respond, "Yeah, I have 2 brothers. I'm closest with the youngest one." Or someone might ask, "Are you seeing anyone?" And you say, "Yeah, I've been dating someone for a few months." These expressions help make personal conversations easier and more natural. Now let's look at expressions used in emergencies or urgent situations. A very important one is, "Call 911," which you use when there's a serious emergency in the United States. You might also say, I need help, or something's wrong. For example, I think he fainted. Call 911. Or, there's smoke coming from that building. We need to get out. If you're injured, you can say, I've hurt my leg, or I think I broke my arm. These help first responders or doctors understand your situation. If someone else is hurt, you might say, he's bleeding, or she's not breathing. These are critical expressions in emergencies. Also, people often say, stay calm, or everything's going to be okay. To reassure someone who's scared or anxious, practice time. Imagine you're with a friend who falls and hits their head. You say, are you okay? They reply, no, I feel dizzy. You say, sit down, I'm calling for help. These kinds of expressions can be life-saving and are very important to know. Now let's talk about common expressions used at school or in a learning environment. A student might say, I'm taking a math class, or I have a lot of homework. These are typical when talking about schoolwork. You might also hear, the test was hard, or I need to study more. These are used often by students of all ages. Teachers often say things like, pay attention, turn in your homework, or let's begin the lesson. Students might ask, can I go to the bathroom? Or, do we have any homework? These are everyday phrases in classrooms. If you're taking an online class, you might say, I am attending a virtual class, or I submitted my assignment online. Let's practice this situation. You're talking to a classmate and say, did you understand the assignment? They respond, not really. I think I'll ask the teacher for help. Then you say, good idea. I might do the same. These are normal learning-related conversations. Now let's explore expressions commonly used at work or in a professional environment. One of the most common is I have a meeting, or I'm in a meeting right now. These are useful when you're busy with work discussions. Another useful one is, let's touch base later, which means to talk again soon about something. For example, if you're working on a project and need to follow up, you might say, let's touch base tomorrow morning. When you want to say you're available, you can say, I'm free at 3 p.m., or I'm available this afternoon. These help with scheduling. If you're busy, you might say, I'm swamped, which means you have a lot of work. Or I'm tied up right now, meaning you're currently busy and can't talk or meet. Another common one is, let's schedule a call, or can we set up a meeting? These are very useful in business communication. During meetings, you might hear phrases like, let's get started, or let's go over the agenda. If you want to ask a question, you can say, can I jump in here? Or, I have a quick point. If you agree with someone, you might say, I totally agree, or that makes sense. If you disagree politely, you can say, I see your point, but I think, or I'm not sure I agree with that. Practice example. Imagine you're in a virtual meeting. You say, can we go over the timeline again? A colleague responds, sure. We plan to finish the first stage by next week. You say, thanks. That helps a lot. These expressions are perfect for professional settings and common in office life. Let's now look at expressions used when making plans with friends or others. A very common one is, are you free this weekend? Or, Do you want to hang out? These are casual ways to invite someone to spend time together. If you agree, you might say, "Sure, that sounds fun," or "Yeah, I'm free on Saturday." If you're busy, you might say, "I can't make it," or "maybe another time." Other useful phrases include, "Let's grab a coffee," or "Let's catch a movie." These are simple and friendly ways to suggest activities. If you need to change plans, you might say, "Can we reschedule?" or "Something came up." And if you want to finalize plans, you might say, "Let's meet at 6," or "I'll text you the details." Practice time. You're texting a friend and say, "Hey, want to grab lunch tomorrow?" They reply, "Sure, what time?" You respond, "How about 12:30 at the usual place?" They say, "Perfect. See you then." These are relaxed and real-life examples of social planning. Now let's cover expressions used when talking about your hobbies or interests. You might hear or say, "I'm into photography," or "I love playing the guitar." These are ways to share your personal interests. Other common ones are, "I'm a big fan of movies," or "I enjoy reading in my free time." These are great conversation starters too. If someone asks, "What do you do for fun?" you might respond, "I like to hike on weekends," or "I spend my evenings watching shows." You can also use expressions like, "I'm learning how to cook," or "I've recently started painting." These show ongoing interests and are common in everyday chat. Practice moment. A coworker asks, "What do you usually do on weekends?" And you say, "I usually go biking or hang out with friends." Then they say, "That sounds nice. I like going to the park with my dog." These are everyday ways to connect over hobbies. Let's also talk about expressions used when talking about goals or future plans. People often say, "I want to learn a new language," or "I'm planning to travel more." These express hopes or intentions. You can also say, "I'm working toward a promotion," or "I hope to buy a house next year." These are clear and useful phrases. If you're unsure about your future, you might say, "I'm still figuring things out," or "I'm not sure what's next." These are honest and natural. Another useful expression is, "I've set some goals for this year," or "I'm trying to improve my skills." Let's do a short practice scene. You're chatting with a friend and say, "I'm planning to take a photography class." They say, "That's cool. I've always wanted to do that." Then you add, "Yeah, I think it'll be fun and a good way to meet people." These are natural ways to express goals and plans. Let's now look at expressions people use when dealing with technology or using devices in daily life. These are becoming more and more common in everyday conversation. For example, when something isn't working, people often say, "My phone's acting up," or "The Wi-Fi is down." These phrases help describe technical problems casually. You might also hear, "The app keeps crashing," or "My computer froze." These are ways to talk about software or device issues. When you want to check something online, you might say, "Let me Google it," or "I'll look it up." These are common expressions when searching for information. If you want to suggest something, you can say, "You should try restarting it," or "Maybe update the app." These are typical pieces of advice people give when troubleshooting. If you're watching something, you might say, "I'm streaming a movie," or "I'm binge watching a show." These are useful in casual chats about media and entertainment. Let's practice with a short dialogue. Someone says, "My internet is super slow today." You reply, "Mine too." "Maybe the router needs to be reset." They respond, "Yeah, I'll unplug it and plug it back in." These are common tech expressions and very helpful. Now let's go over phrases used when talking about weather. Weather is a popular small talk topic, especially when you first meet someone or don't know them well. You might say, "It's really hot today," or "It's freezing outside." These are simple ways to describe temperature. If it's raining, people say, "It's pouring," or "It's drizzling," depending on how heavy the rain is. You might hear, "The weather's been crazy lately," or "It's supposed to snow tomorrow." These are ways to talk about changes or forecasts. You could also say, "I love this kind of weather," or "I hate the humidity." These express personal opinions about weather, which is very common in daily life. Here's a practice example. A coworker says, "Did you see the weather forecast?" You respond, "Yeah, looks like it's going to rain all weekend." They say, "Perfect excuse to stay indoors and watch movies." These conversations are typical and easy to start. Let's now look at expressions used when talking about money or finances. One common phrase is, "I'm on a budget," which means you're trying to spend less. Another is, "That's too expensive," or "I can't afford it," which means something costs too much. If something is affordable, you can say, "That's a good deal," or "It's reasonably priced." When talking about payment, people often say, "Do you take cards?" or "Can I pay with cash?" If you split a bill with someone, you might say, "Let's go halves," or "We can split the bill." Another useful expression is, "I'm saving up for something," which means you're putting money aside. For example, "I'm saving up for a new phone." Let's practice. You're at a store and the cashier says, "Your total is $52. You say, "Do you take credit cards?" They say, "Yes, we do." You respond, "Great, I'll use my card." Then you might say to a friend, "That was a bit pricey, but I've been saving up for it." These phrases are great for everyday purchases and financial discussions. Let's move on to expressions about emotions or feelings. People often say, "I'm feeling down," or "I'm in a great mood." These describe emotional states. If you're nervous, you might say, "I have butterflies in my stomach," or "I'm a little anxious." If you're excited, you can say, "I'm so pumped," or "I can't wait." Another helpful one is, "I'm stressed out," which means you're overwhelmed. Or "I feel relaxed" when you're calm. You might also hear, "I'm burned out," meaning you've been working too hard and need rest. These expressions are useful for understanding others' moods and sharing your own. Let's go through a quick practice. A friend says, "I have a big presentation tomorrow." You reply, "You must be nervous." They say, "Yeah, I've got butterflies." "But I'm also excited." You respond, "You'll do great." These conversations are full of feeling-related expressions. Now let's cover common expressions for traveling or commuting. You might say, "I'm stuck in traffic," or "I missed my bus." These are very common for people who travel daily. Others might say, "I'm running late," or "I'll be there in 10 minutes." These are used when coordinating with others. At the airport, you might hear, "I need to check in," or "Where's the boarding gate?" During travel, people say, "It's a long flight," or "I've got jet lag." If you're driving, you might say, I need to get gas, or I'm taking a different route. These are essential when you're talking about getting from place to place. Here's a practice situation. You text your friend, "I'm stuck in traffic. I'll be there soon." They reply, "No worries. Drive safe." Then you say, "Thanks. I should be there in about 15 minutes." These are useful phrases for keeping in touch during travel delays. Now let's look at some casual expressions you might hear at restaurants or cafes. When you enter a place to eat, you might say, "Table for two, please," or "Can we sit outside?" These are polite ways to request seating. When looking at the menu, people often say, "What do you recommend?" or "I'll have the special." These are great for ordering food and asking for suggestions. If you are ready to pay, you can say, "Can we get the check?" or "Could I have the bill, please?" These are common in both casual and formal dining. If the food was good, you can say, "Everything was delicious," or "That was amazing." If it wasn't, you might say, "It was okay," or "Not really what I expected." You might also hear, "Let's split the check," or "This one's on me," meaning one person is paying. Here's a practice situation. A server says, "Are you ready to order?" You reply, "Yes, I'll have the chicken sandwich, please." They say, "Would you like anything to drink?" You respond, "Just water, thanks." After eating, you say, "Can we get the check?" These expressions are very common and useful in everyday dining. Now let's go over common phrases used when giving or receiving directions. When you're lost or unsure where to go, you might say, "Excuse me, how do I get to the train station?" Or, "Is this the way to Main Street?" If someone is helping you, they might say, "Go straight and then turn left," or "It's right around the corner." Other helpful directions include, "It's across from the post office," or "It's next to the bank." If you're using a map or GPS, you might say, "I'll just follow the map," or "Let me check Google Maps." If you miss a turn, you might say, "Oops, I think I went the wrong way," or "I need to turn around." Let's practice. You're in a new city and ask a local, "Hi, do you know where the museum is?" They say, "Sure. Just go 2 blocks down and turn right. It's next to the library." You respond, "Thanks so much." These are great, polite ways to ask for help. Let's now explore phrases for everyday shopping situations. When you walk into a store, someone might ask, "Can I help you find anything?" You can say, "I'm just looking, thanks," or "Yes, I'm looking for a jacket." If you want to try something on, you might ask, "Where's the fitting room?" or "Can I try this on?" If something is too expensive, you can say, "That's out of my budget," or "Do you have anything cheaper?" When you decide to buy, you might say, "I'll take it," or "I'll get this one." At the checkout, people often say, "Can I use my card?" or "Do you have a bag?" These are simple, useful shopping expressions. Here's a quick practice scene. You're in a clothing store and say, "Hi, I'm looking for jeans." The employee says, "They're over there near the back." You find a pair and ask, "Can I try these on?" After trying them, you say, "They fit well. I'll wash them." These phrases will help you feel confident in stores. Let's now explore common expressions when using public services, like the bank or post office. At the bank, you might say, "I'd like to open an account," or "I need to deposit some money." If you're at the post office, you could say, I'd like to send this package, or how much is postage to Canada? When making appointments or handling services, people often say, I'd like to make an appointment, or do you have any availability this week? These are formal and polite expressions. You might also say, I need to renew my ID, or I'd like to report a lost item. These phrases are very helpful when handling tasks that involve paperwork or identification. Let's practice with a sample interaction. You walk into a post office and say, Hi, I'd like to send this package overseas. The clerk says, Sure. Do you want express or regular shipping? You say, Regular is fine. How long will it take? They respond, About 7 days. These kinds of exchanges happen all the time in real life. Let's end with a few expressions you can use to encourage others or show support. People often say, You've got this, or keep going, to cheer someone on. If a friend is struggling, you can say, I'm here for you, or let me know if you need anything. These show kindness and support. If someone succeeds, you can say, Congratulations, or Well done. If someone makes a mistake, you might say, No worries, or It happens. These help keep the conversation positive and friendly. You can also say, Don't give up, or Believe in yourself. These are strong and uplifting expressions that make a big difference. Practice example. Your friend says, I don't think I can do this exam. You say, Of course you can. Just take your time and stay calm. You've studied hard. They reply, Thanks. That really helps. These supportive phrases are great for friends, family, and coworkers alike. Thanks for learning with me today. I hope these everyday expressions help you speak more naturally and confidently in English. The more you practice, the more fluent you'll become. Try using a few of these phrases today in real conversations and see how much easier communication can be. Keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Take care and happy learning.